episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Welcome everybody again to another episode of our show with another really fascinating guest today, helping to create a better tomorrow on many different fronts. Today we have the honor of being joined by Mandy Sellars, who is the chairperson of the GoPI3Ks charity, which is focused on people with PIK3CA related overgrowth spectrum disorders, or PROS, which is an umbrella term for a group of very rare syndromes which are categorized by tissue overgrowth and malformations caused by mutations in the PIK3CA gene. She herself also possesses a very rare form of this genetic mutation that has resulted in extraordinary growth of both of her legs, but in PROS diseases, individuals can see with various manifestations of different tissues, including skin, bone, fat, brain tissue, depending on the specific nature of the disease. And for those in the genetics field that are listening or watching, PIK3CA stands for phosphatidylinositol 4,5-biphosphonate 3 kinase catalytic subunit alpha, which is a gene that encodes a lipid kinase, which is involved in many signaling pathways in the body that influence many cellular functions, including growth, death, and proliferation. Ms. Sellars obtained her bachelor's in psychology from the University of Central Lancaster and has been a patient advocate, a fundraiser for research, and a reality star along the way. Ms. Mandy Sellars, thanks so much for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us a little bit.
You're very welcome.
It's great to have you. I'd love to start off by basically handing you the floor for a little bit. If you can sort of take us back to sort of the early days in your journey. I was reading along the way that doctors initially had diagnosed you, or they thought they had diagnosed you with some other rare disease known as Proteus syndrome, which you debated along the way wasn't what was going on here. But take us back a little to the early days and your early journey with this very ultra rare condition.
Yeah, I mean, I can take you right back to the day I was born, really, which is obviously a very long time ago now. Yeah, I was born in 1975, and at that particular time when I was born, the doctors took a look at my legs and my feet, and it was just like, what is this? You know, they've never seen anything like it before. My legs and both my feet were extremely large, probably about 4 or 5 times larger than the average baby. And the doctors at the time didn't expect me to live, which now when we look at it medically, there was absolutely nothing wrong with me in that respect, that I should die prematurely. All my organs were absolutely fine. But just because obviously they'd never seen anything like that before, it was just a case of, well, surely this baby can't survive. But here I am 46 years later and still going strong. I think it was around about when I was 2. The doctors said I may have a condition called lymphedema.
Mm-hmm.
But if anybody knows anything about lymphedema, and what I have, absolutely nothing like it at all. But obviously, back in 1977, as it was then, that was kind of the only thing that was around at the time that they could give any indications to what it was. Even though when people see like pictures of me as a child, they probably think that must have been very difficult to learn to walk, to run, to just have a general childhood. But really, my childhood was very happy. I did see doctors, but simply because they couldn't do anything for me. I never had any kind of operations, and I just got on with life. You know, my parents were always very supportive, you know, treated me like the average child. And if I wanted to do something, it was a case of, Mandy, yes, you go ahead and try to do it. It may have taken me a little bit longer, depending on what the activity was, but I always kind of found a way to be able to do those things. I guess schooling was absolutely fine. I went to what they called maybe like a special school. I don't know what they call it in America, but it's a school for people with disabilities. So, and that was great, really, because it was like having a little family, because everybody had their own medical condition, but we were kind of like a little family that kind of accepted our differences along the way. And I think when you're younger, you don't really take too much notice of maybe the fact that you visually look a lot different. You just get on with life. And I think when you hit teenage years, like for anybody, you know, the hormones start and you're just thinking, you start feeling different than everybody else. And then obviously when you do look physically different, like I do, it's kind of a bit like, ooh, you know, I know I'm different, but the reactions of people in the general public, that kind of hit me a lot harder when I was in my teenage years, because obviously teenagers can be quite cruel at times, you know, but on the flip side, they can be really nice as well. So it's not like targeting them all with the same brush, if you will. You know, there's good and bad in everybody, isn't there? In terms of my mobility, I guess it was quite good, really, despite the problems I had. And I think up until maybe my late 20s, early 30s, I was kind of doing okay. You know, I was keeping up with my peers and my friends, whether that be academically or going out to pubs, nightclubs, just doing the average thing that an average 20-year-old would do, you know. So I was loving life at that point, without a doubt. So it wasn't until, I always forget dates, but I think it was around about 2002, something like that, that I kind of realised that my legs were getting larger and obviously and consequently getting heavier. And walking was becoming increasingly difficult. And I didn't have a diagnosis at that time, as we know. So I kind of thought, well, maybe now is the time to try and research something, anything, just to see if there is something out there that maybe someone can give me a diagnosis and maybe even a treatment. I mean, that in my own mind was always quite a miracle if it ever happened, because I just didn't think it would. So I'm probably kind of speeding up a little bit as to what happened, because to get to the more interesting parts, I think. So I think it was, I'll say I'm hopeless with dates, but I ended up with a few medical problems. So I ended up in hospital with various things. Doctors didn't really know what to do. I remember when I attended university, I was living away from home at the time, and I realised how difficult it was becoming physically to be able to keep up with my peers. So I decided at that particular time that I wanted to defer my course, come home and take the path of having liposuction on my left leg. So I thought that was the right thing to do at the time. I know now differently, it wasn't the right thing to do, but that was the only option I had at that particular moment in time. They took away, I think, about 6 pounds of excess fat. But unfortunately, due to like inactivity after the operation, I ended up putting about 20 pounds back on. So it really kind of defeated the object of what I was trying to achieve, really. But it didn't stop me, and I carried on, you know, partying with my friends at the weekend, studying during the week. And yeah, I was lucky enough to be able to kind of actually go to university again, but this was more local, and ended up doing a degree in psychology, as you mentioned. And that was quite an achievement, because I never thought I would be able to do something like that. And it kind of spurred me on to be able to want to do more learning. And I decided I wanted to become a counsellor. I don't know what term they use in America, if it is called a counsellor, if it's the same thing or not. But that was like a long 3-year course. And unfortunately, just after the second year, I had an episode which at the time we didn't know exactly what it was. So I'll just run through a little bit of actually what happened. It was one morning I actually woke up and my legs were tingling. So I just didn't think anything too much about it. So I got into the bath as usual. And as I was getting out of the bath, I kind of experienced some kind of low level pain in my legs. But my legs felt a lot heavier than what they actually always did. So I thought there's something not quite right here. So I managed to get to the front door, then got back to my bed where the pain intensified. Oh, it was horrendous. But at the same time, which sounds a bit silly to say, but I was losing feeling in my legs at the same time as well, and I couldn't move them. So I ended up in hospital and did several tests. Nobody knew what it was. I went to see a neurologist, stayed in hospital there, still no idea what it was. Thankfully, the feeling actually did come back. We don't know why, but it came back around about 80%. But for me now, it doesn't feel like 80%. It's just normal because it happened that long ago now. But it wasn't until, I think it was maybe 15 years later, that I bumped into one of the doctors at a different appointment. And he said, oh, we actually did find out in the end what you had, and it was a spinal stroke. And it's just like, that's such a random thing to find out 15 years later.
Wow.
But I did find out at the time that I had a blood disorder as well. So I am on warfarin now for the rest of my life. So that should stop any kind of stroke or anything like that happening again, thank goodness. So yeah, and since then, my mobility has kind of gradually gone downhill. And obviously the reason, because I've had obviously the spinal stroke caused problems. A few years after that, I ended up in hospital again with various complications. And that meant, again, I had to learn to walk. And all these different episodes have made, or did make, walking very, very difficult.
Surely.
And considering at that same time, my legs were still continually growing because nobody knew what it was. Nobody knew if there was a way to stop it. And it was kind of like a weird set of circumstances as to how it led to my diagnosis, really.
Right.
I got in touch with Tracy Whitewood-Neal, and she's the founder of the Proteus Syndrome UK support group in England. She put me in touch with Dr. Les Biesecker from America, who is the person that knows everything there is to know about Proteus syndrome. So I met with him, and he took a look at me. He said, yeah, you may have Proteus syndrome, but if you do, it's a very rare form of it. So I just thought, okay, it's probably not Proteus, is it really? So my search again continued, and after that I did some fundraising for the Proteus Syndrome UK because they'd helped me with various things, and I ended up with my story in the local newspaper. And then from then, a TV production company said, we'd like to do your story. We'd like to try and follow it and see if we can find a diagnosis. So it's a case of, well, what have I got to lose, really? I'm not finding any answers on my own. So maybe they might have more influence. And thankfully they did. So it took a couple of years. And in between that, as life goes, fate takes over. And in 2010, I ended up having to have an amputation on my left leg. I'd had various foot ulcers on that left foot for many years, probably 12, 13 years, continually getting worse and worse and worse, to the point where I had septicemia, blood poisoning. So there was simply no way back from that. I mean, again, as fate would have it, I had planned to have that amputation in the September of that particular year. So I found a surgeon who, despite obviously my own complications with like larger blood vessels, which were a major obstacle, you know, he was confident that he could do it. And I'm so glad that I found Mr. Nigam, because if I hadn't, and obviously this thing had happened with the septicemia, I don't think I would have survived, because I know my local hospital said there's no way they could have performed that operation. You know, if they'd have tried, I wouldn't have survived. So again, it was fate, destiny, whatever you'd like to call it, that I met Mr. Nigam and he was able to save my life. You know, so yeah, that was an interesting life event, and the TV company did follow me for that as well. And I think the title of the program was Losing One of My Giant Legs, which is obviously does what it says on the tin. So yeah, so from that moment, there was still obviously the keen interest from the TV company to try and find a diagnosis. And that led to me meeting with doctors at Addenbrooke's in Cambridgeshire. And at that particular time, because medical technology had moved on greatly since I was born, they were able to do genetic DNA sequencing. So that meant taking a tissue sample from my leg, which is affected, then a tissue sample from my arm, which isn't affected, and then doing the DNA sequencing on it.
Yep.
And it took a couple of months, but then I got the phone call saying, you know, we found what your gene is, and it's a single letter mutation in the PIK3CA. I never get that correct. PIK3CA growth pathway.
Sure.
So there's a mutation in that gene. And the kind of the weird thing, I was like so surprised that they'd even found the gene. I never thought they would, that I kind of wanted to celebrate it, which may sound a bit crazy to some people, but I'd found my identity, you know, what makes Mandy Mandy.
Right.
So I thought, how can I celebrate this? So I got a tattoo. I got a tattoo that says PIK3CA with the double helix. I don't know if you can see that on there.
Yep. Sure, perfect. There it is.
So yeah, that's my way of like just saying that this is Mandy. I'm proud to be me, really.
Yeah.
So once he'd found the gene, I kind of thought the news couldn't get any better, but it did. Later that year, they said that they'd actually found a drug that was already out there called sirolimus.
Yep.
And it's a drug that they use as an anti-rejection drug for patients who've had kidney transplants.
Right.
Also now they use it as well in cancer patients. And what that it does, it blocks the signal in that growth pathway where my mutated gene is. So it kind of like blocks the signal getting through, because with my gene, we all have the PIK3CA gene, but my gene is constantly switched on, where the average person, it will switch on, switch off, switch on, switch off at different times.
Sure.
So the areas of my body that's affected with this mutation is constantly switched on, so constantly growing.
You know, Mandy, it's really interesting. I don't mean to interrupt this part of the story, but this is there's a fascinating connection here on many levels, because a couple of months ago we did a show with a gentleman actually here in Philadelphia that he himself has a disease called Castleman's disease, which is it's not like, I mean, it's a hypergrowth disease. Like PIK3CA, but of the immune system, where every part of his immune system just grew uncontrollably and just destroyed him from inside. And they also found that, hey, there's this sirolimus or rapamycin, as you know, the brand name here in the United States. Wow, this slows it down. And you know, it's not the first time we heard about rapamycin doing really interesting things. It's being used, as you said, for cancer. It's very hot in sort of just in general aging, because, you know, it slows down the way cells grow. Well, talk about your experience in taking it, because I know it's a, you know, it's not the safe, well, say it's a safe drug, but it does a lot of things in the human body. What was your experience in taking it? Because I think I read that you were on it for about a couple months and you saw a reduction in the size and so forth. What was your experience like in sort of experimenting with this medicine?
Yeah, as you say, it's an experiment really, but for me, I was never in any doubt that I would take it, because there was no other options out there. So it's like, give me that tablet, let's see what happens.
Sure.
And yeah, you're correct. I was on a very low dose, I think 1 milligram, where somebody, for the anti-rejection purpose, I think maybe 6-8 milligrams a day. So a lower dose that I was taking. Yeah, and within the first 3 months, my left leg particularly, well, no, I'm not saying left, both legs actually, if I remember correctly, had stopped growing. And I'd lost, I think, 10 kilograms in 3 months from the affected areas, particularly my legs. And that was just like amazing, because obviously I was willing it to work, I was wanting it to work, but the fact that it had, and the fact that I'd lost so much weight in such a short space of time was, it sounds a bit corny to say nothing short of a miracle, but for me it was. Sure. I never thought that that would be anything that would happen, especially within my lifetime. And I think I stayed on rapamycin for maybe 5 years, 5.5 years. And within that time, yes, the reduction in the weight, or the weight I was losing, slowed down. I think that was just inevitable, because obviously you couldn't beat what happened in the first 3 months at all.
Sure.
You know, but I'd lost continual weight slowly for that 5.5 years. I think in the end, I'd lost about 5 stone, which I don't know what that equates to in pounds or kilograms, but it's a lot.
Sounds like a lot.
Yeah, and it was, and that made life a lot easier. I could move around a lot easier, wheel myself around, and just generally do things without kind of getting so tired all the time, or, you know, things aching or my arthritis kicking in because I had so much weight in my limbs.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but I think it was 2018, and
Mm-hmm.
that's when I noticed that my weight had become quite static. And then the following months after that, it started to gradually increase and increase further and further. And that really was the time when I realized that, again, rapamycin wasn't working as well as it was. And does that mean it's going to stop working completely? My own thoughts at the time was that I was happy to up the dose.
Sure.
And increase the dose to maybe 1.5 or 2 milligrams. But the doctor I had at the time, he wasn't too keen on that. And looking back now, I can understand why, because I don't know if my immune system was a little bit suppressed because of it, but I'd always had problems with pressure sores on both my feet throughout my life.
Sure.
But while I was taking rapamycin, those sores were not healing at all. And the concern probably for me was I didn't want to end up in a situation with my right foot as I had with my left, and developing blood poisoning, you know, which could lead to another amputation.
Sure.
So, you know, after a few discussions with the doctor, it was decided that I should stop taking rapamycin. But that was without any plan moving forward, because there was nothing else that I could take or do at that particular time. So it was agreed that I could stop it. My excuse me, my idea was to take a break, let the rapamycin get out of my system, and then maybe try taking it again.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, I had spoken to a number of other patients that have had similar experiences with rapamycin, and all of them said that once they took it for the second time, it wasn't as effective as the first. So it really didn't seem like there was much point really in trying that. So ever since then, it's been a case of waiting for another drug to come out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because obviously my mutated gene is involved in a lot of cancers like breast cancer, bowel cancer.
Sure.
That in a way is a good thing for me, because obviously there's going to be constant research into that condition. So again, it's looking for like repurposed drugs to use. Obviously rapamycin was, and there's a new drug now called apellicib, which has been tried on breast cancer patients with wonderful results. It's been tried on prostate patients in other countries, and that showed great results as well. So it's just for me, living in the UK, obviously we have the National Health Service. For me to be able to use a repurposed drug, I need to, well, not me personally, but my doctors need to apply on my behalf for compassionate use of that drug.
I see.
So we're in the process of doing that at the moment, but it's a long process with no guarantee that the funding team will say, yes, Mandy can have this drug, even though there's no other option out there. And also there's evidence from, yes, it's from other countries, but there is evidence there that shows that it does work. So fingers crossed, I'm hoping at some point, maybe this year, that I will be able to take that drug, and hopefully it'll make a big difference, because at the moment for me, my condition is probably, I wouldn't say as bad as it's been in the past. It's different in the sense that there are certain things now that maybe this time last year were relatively easier.
Right.
It took time to do it, but they were easier. Now it's becoming increasingly difficult, like getting dressed, putting my shoe on, it's all simple things that the average person takes for granted, but I know that that is changing rapidly for me.
Sure.
And I fear losing my independence, my ability to do things on my own, and that for me is just not acceptable, especially when there's something out there that could help.
Yep.
So I'm going to keep fighting, even if the funding team turn me down. You know, there's maybe the possibility of going directly to the drugs company in America. Sure. And saying, you know, this is me, this is my situation, you know, I want to take your drug. You know, if you're happy for me to, I will feed back any information you want to show that it's working. You know, so it's just a case I will fight to get what I want, because, you know, you only get one life. I want to live it the way I want to and not be ruled by a condition that I was born with.
I mean, there's two very, I think, two very important and inspirational messages here in this part of your story, in the sense that we can't forget that there's, I don't know the number, say 7,000 rare diseases out there, and this concept of repurposing, which has only sort of recently begun in recent years, is such an important path where there's not, you know, you're not going to see the dollars as in Alzheimer's or cancer, what have you, but there's a lot of drugs out there on the market that we don't really know what they do yet. And if rapamycin works, great. If this other drug works, great. And at the same time, as you're saying, you know, it's there's a couple hundred countries out there as well, different regulations, and we have unique things going on now. We've talked to people in terms of sort of how we can, in one country, sort of speed up the compassionate access for certain patients. So I think these are very important themes that your story helps get out there. You know, you know, reading a little bit about your organization and the foundation, it's very interesting because you know, you don't focus on, obviously, research, because these are extremely rare diseases, but some of the things that you are doing, while they may seem simpler in the sense of, you know, modifying a car or creating a larger set of pants, major, you know, impact on people's lives that, you know, on a small, but nonetheless. Talk a little bit about some of, you know, what it's like running the organization or the charity on a daily basis, and obviously nothing confidential, but if you can talk about some of these the people that you're helping, I think that'd be another interesting thing to hear about.
Yeah, sure. I set up GoPIKs in, I think, 2017 now. Basically because the idea behind it, when I spoke to my doctors, they said there wasn't a support group in the UK to help people with PROS. So that was the idea behind setting it up. What we kind of do with the charity, we help people psychologically, you know, because living with a rare condition, it has its ups and downs, without a doubt, you know. So to be able to help them, you know, just talk to them, introduce them to other families that are going through the same thing or similar things, but also we support them financially as well, because there are extra costs that come from living with a rare disease, like not being able to buy regular shoes, regular trousers, so they need adapting. Such things as going to hospital visits. You know, if you live in Scotland and you've got to go to London, you know, that is going to cost you a lot of money. So we've been able to help people with things like that. And there's one particular family that we've been able to help. Her daughter, who has PROS, she is a really, really good dancer. And she had to have an operation on her leg, and they were worried that after the operation that she wouldn't be able to dance again. So she needed specialized physio for her to be able to do this, but the family just couldn't afford that. So for us to be able to help fund that was such an amazing thing, because her mum sent me pictures of her after, when she'd had the operation, when she'd had the physio, and she was dancing again. And she even, the little girl, wrote something to me just saying how amazing it was that she was able to dance again, because when she dances, it takes away all her worries. She doesn't think about anything else, but the message she gets across from dancing, just that she's just like everybody else, you know. So to be able to help with just things like that is just simply amazing, really. And it's wonderful, you know. I didn't have anything like that growing up, you know. And also we've run a family weekend as well. We haven't been able to since because of COVID, but we ran a family weekend, and that, even for me, it was just amazing to see the connections that the parents made with each other, the children made with each other, because they didn't feel they were alone anymore. You know, that was such a wonderful feeling to be able to do that and bring people together. And that is something we hope to be able to do again at some point once COVID restrictions have been lifted and we can bring people together with the doctors as well.
Absolutely. Very inspiring. Mandy, I was checking out your photo gallery on your website, and I guess before COVID you were traveling quite a bit, not just around the UK, but you were here in New York, you were in Las Vegas, I believe. Are you planning on, obviously we're getting out of this thing, but are you planning any major travel? And then at the same time, I also noticed that you are very fond of archery and skeet shooting. I think, are you getting a lot of that in as well? And are there these and other passions of yours, things that you're still taking advantage of?
In terms of traveling, certainly going abroad, that for me, I think sadly is over now. Since the amputation, I've not been able to get onto a plane, just simply because, one, I haven't been able to wear a false leg long enough to be able to use it on a daily basis. I can use it for exercise when it fits, which it doesn't currently, but using it to kind of go on vacation, it's just not going to happen, unfortunately. But there's some beautiful places in the UK that I still want to visit, so that's kind of where my vacations are going to be, which is absolutely fine. In terms of like hobbies, like you say, COVID has put a stop to a lot of those different things, but I do love traveling, and I do love, my kind of passion these days is tennis. I absolutely love tennis, and I've been to Wimbledon before and been to a couple of other things. So I'd like to kind of go back to Wimbledon one day and just see some of the greats before they retire. I was lucky enough to see Roger Federer. I've seen Nadal play. I haven't seen Djokovic play as yet, and I would love to see Serena play. So you never know. One of these days I might get back there while they're still playing.
And once again, I'm sitting here on the East Coast of the U.S., and I did see you on TV several times actually, as you were filming your procedures and so forth during that part of your life. Obviously, you're not traveling, but any more reality TV, any programs, anything we should be on the lookout for you once again coming up outside of the COVID epidemic that we should be looking for Mandy Sellars to be involved in?
I wish I could give you the answer that was yes, but unfortunately, no. I think with the media, I think that kind of like has all died away now. I think because obviously they've got the story of this is Mandy. We've not seen anybody who looks like that before, but Mandy hasn't got a diagnosis. Let's get her one. Right. And then Mandy had treatment. Mandy had a leg off, and I don't really know where they would go after that unless it was looking at how my situation is now. Like like I say, because it's got worse, and obviously looking at the I would say call it a chemotherapy drug, but the Alpelisib that they use for breast cancer, so that's possibly a story, but there isn't anything in the pipeline, unfortunately, because I do enjoy doing it. It's nice to kind of meet different people, but no.
So we'll keep fingers crossed that they'll be able to do something on repurposing as you journey continually, because you have the passion behind you, and I think you definitely, it sounds like you're going to stay on this path, not just managing the charity, but also obviously looking for solutions that not only they're not only going to help you, but once again inspire everybody else for the thousands of other rare diseases out there, that there is something here that can be done. That if you get that effort and you look and you research, there are possibilities out there. So I think there's some important messages there. Mandy, any final messages that you want to give to the audience? I'd be glad to give you the floor back, but anything else that I missed that you want to mention, please take the floor.
I think one of the things that I would say, I think at times people can be quite fearful of the unknown or scared of people who look different, and I do understand that. I get that, because when you see something you've never seen before, it is a bit of a shock. Oh, what is that? Why does that person look like that? You know, if that person looks like that, does that mean they can't talk? Does that mean they don't understand if I speak to them? And I think it's just a case of, you know, just treat everybody as you would anybody else, or should I say, treat somebody who may look differently or have a rare disease like you would treat your mum, your dad, your sister, your brother.
Sure.
You know, and if you're worried that they may not be able to understand you, I've always said, and I always will say this, just simply smile. Smiling at somebody, even if you don't know them, you know, they could be having a bad day, but smiling at someone just really gives that person a lift. It makes them kind of, you have that some kind of connection. You might never speak, you might just pass on the street, but smiling just really gives some kind of connection to strangers, and that can mean more than anything.
We definitely need more of that in today's world, and it makes you feel pretty good inside too when you smile. So
Yeah.
no, that's a that's a great message. Mandy, I just, you know, really wishing you the best with all this. It's fascinating things that you're involved in, not just for yourself, but for the charity, and just, you know, wishing you really the best and continuation of everything that you're doing. For everybody that's going to be listening to this particular episode on the podcast or watching on the YouTube channel, you've been listening to Mandy Sellars, chairperson of the GoPI3Ks charity, advocating for patients, fundraising for research, and really spreading awareness of rare disease, drug repurposing, and ultimately possibilities for the future. Mandy, I just want to once again thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to talk to us. Thank you for what you've been doing. As we say on our show, thank you for helping to create a better tomorrow for others. It's a very inspiring message you have.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.